I arrived back in Hinckley. We had 2 children, Kathleen and Harvey at that time. And so we went to Dr. Morgan's funeral, and then I opened up the office, and the insurance man who owned the building notified me that I had to move, that he would not lease to me Dr. Morgan's office. So I went down the street and finally found a building that was San Bernardino County Health Department that was vacant and up for rent. So I rented that, and H&E was Herb and Ed Stein lumberyard in Barstow. My Uncle John had built their first garage that they had built in Boron, California. So we had some relationship there with them. So I was able to obtain supplies and lumber and rebuild the inside to an office. Purchased an X-ray down in LA and had it installed, and opened up my practice there in Barstow. And so we decided to move to Barstow, so we traded the house in. Happened to have a Rotarian that was in the real estate business, and he said, you can trade your house in for one up on A Lane that's in construction right now. So it was a custom built house, and so I was able to obtain that. And then we lived there for a couple of years, and during that couple of years we had 2 more children, so we had 4. And I progressed through Rotary and eventually ended up as president of the Barstow Rotary Club. And we were very active, so I had Rotarians in my office that would, we had projects. We had an international project, we had a community service project, we had a public relations project, and then we had there was 4 major Rotarian classification programs for all the clubs, from all the way from Barstow all the way to Long Beach. Big clubs, 150 members. And we had a club of only probably maybe 28 people, but we were very active. Well, that year we worked so hard, we mailed stuff to the orphanage in Alaska, surgical tools down at Irapuato, Mexico, to the little hospital. And locally we did a lot of work at the Barstow Community Hospital. We built a wall, a brick wall, a retaining wall. And so at the end of the year, when we had the big Rotary International Convention, or not, no, it was the district convention, Barstow Rotary walked away with the 3 major prizes, which was unbelievable. And Dr. McGrain did all the PR work. Barstow newspaper had articles every week in the newspaper. Dear friend of mine. And so then my wife, Kathy, her last child was Elizabeth, and she was born in Apple Valley at the Apple Valley Hospital. And unfortunately, she suffered postpartum psychosis, got very depressed, started popping pills and using a little alcohol, and became very irritable, etc. And we were having domestic problems. So she decided that she would get a divorce. And so she filed for a divorce. And in those days, a man had no rights whatsoever for during a divorce. Not the house, not the children, not the money, not the car. So I lost everything. And the attorney she worked for also moved into my house during the divorce, unfortunately, and they took all the guns away from me because they didn't want me to hurt them. So consequently, I was heartbroken, and for this went on for quite a period of time. So I lost my practice and had a heart attack and went down to Corona, California at a chiropractic hospital. And I was there for, probably 6 months or more. Dr. Nick Kalesa, my friend from Long Beach, came over and we ran specific cardio analysis and etc. And I met the staff there at the hospital, Dr. Spur, and the nurses, and so I was on oxygen, being treated properly. Had this one particular day, I was up, dressed, and went to the cafeteria and had breakfast. And there, I met a little old lady that was sitting there, and she was crying. And I said, can I help you? What is your... And she said, my name's Retta Miller. And I said, I'm Harvey Drejos. She said, we got to talking about, I was from Cedar Rapids and she was from Burlington, Iowa, etc. And she said, I had this hospital built and they're taking it away from me and I don't know what to do. So we got to be friends, and then she said, I'll give you $30,000 if you will get this back for me. And so then the story then will continue where it gets really involved. Thank you. So as the doctor that was managing the hospital decided to go to Corona to spend an evening with his wife and the other two children, unfortunately he passed away, had a heart attack. So now they approached me to put my license on the wall because they needed to have an active license to keep the hospital running. Now, it's a very unusual background that happened. Retta had a husband, and they lived in Santa Ana. They had a beautiful Spanish multi-storied home with apartments in the rear. He had a stroke. They called the doctor, and he treated the husband. The husband did die, and so then the doctor asked Retta, due to they were financially able to do this, that she should build a hospital in her husband's memory. So that's what happened. So the doctor had a brother who was a contractor. So between Corona and the highway that goes to Santa Ana up on the hill, they purchased 40 acres and decided to build the hospital there, which eventually they did. The hospital cost over $100,000. In those days, today it's like over $1 million. And so the doctor and his nurse had his child, and she had a husband, and so they all moved on the hospital property, and they all had staff positions. Unfortunately, the Retta, who was the owner and financed all this, was emotionally upset because they were running and controlling her, and she had no way to be able to, get rid of these bad people. And so that's where I entered the picture, and I met all these people. After doctor died and they asked me to put a certificate on, they said, we'll put you on the staff and we'll continue the operation. Well, meanwhile, Dr. David Dixon in Corona was a practitioner. He was about 6'4", really looked like a big kid. Really, the people really liked him, a good guy. So when I met him, we got along really well. And so he took me on as a patient and heard my background, etc. And so I would go on house calls with him. We'd go up to the Riverside General Hospital tuberculosis ward, and we'd check in, and we'd go up to the TB ward and extract fluid from the patient's lungs, etc. And then that would be one experience there. So as the hospital then something had to be done with the hospital. So couldn't very well sell it because these people were running a lot of control. So I said to myself, Dr. Dixon is a very good doctor. He did spend at least 20 years saving enough money to buy a hospital like this, and he really deserves it because he's dedicated. He has a passion for his patients. And so I decided to talk to Retta and said, if Dr. David Dixon's interested in the hospital, are you willing and able to negotiate a sale? And she said, yes. So we went to Dr. David Dixon and said, would you like to purchase this hospital on contract? He said, let me talk to my attorney. We put the paper together. It was in the newspaper, $300,000, Dr. David Dixon purchased hospital in Corona. And that started a whole total new phase of my life. And so we'll continue on next time.